My name's Jennison, and I'm thinking about guitar. And today we're taking a look at some new guitars from our friends at Paul Reed Smith from their 40th anniversary line. And we're asking the question, are the new guitars better than the old guitars? Or when you compare an older PRS to these new models, do the old ones take the win? Now, in the case of so many brands, especially historical brands like Fender and like Gibson, the early models are the ones that people treasure the most. We all lust after 50s Les Pauls, 60s Strats, etc. And that's no slur on the modern guitars, but we recognize that the old ones are the best. And for so many brands, their primary competition is themselves, but from several decades ago. And there's a huge market for used American guitars, with many people claiming that they're better than the current versions. However, for Paul Reed Smith, this has not been my experience. It's been my experience that year on year PRS improve on the recipe, but I've never actually put it to the test. Now, as I'm sure you guys are aware, I have a whole slew of PRS guitars kicking around beside me. I am a PRS artist, and PRS were kind enough to send us these guitars for review, but this video has not been sponsored, and PRS won't get to see this before it goes out. This is a video we are making for our own edification. It's a question that I have asked myself, and we're about to find out. So, the guitars in question. We're taking a look at two guitars from the new 40th anniversary series. This is the brand new McCarty SC56, and over my shoulder is the new iteration of the Custom 24. And both these guitars feature some new appointments, including the Phase 3 tuners, new bridges on both instruments, nitro finishes, which is something that's quite new for PRS. Certainly they smell nice, I'll tell you that much, and they feel very tactile if you like the feel of nitro, which I do. Also, we have brand new pickups which represent the pinnacle, so far at least, of Paul Reed Smith's personal quest to create the most musical sounding guitar pickups. These are the McCarty 3 pickups, and the pickups in this guitar are the DMO pickups, which stand for dynamic, musical, and open. And they're both kind of low output, vintage style pickups with a little bit of a mid-range scoop, beautiful extension in the high end, and they represent, again, the culmination of a years-long quest from Paul Reed Smith himself to create the perfect pickup. And we're going to compare these guitars against some guitars in my personal collection. Now, this guitar being a McCarty 594 at heart, it has the 594 scale length, the 594 bridge. It doesn't have the split coils, but everything else is pretty much McCarty 594 business as usual. We're going to compare it to my McCarty 594 from the first year of production, which represents a 10-year evolution between the original McCarty 594s and this guitar that I'm holding in my lap here. And this is as close to an apples to apples comparison as I'm going to be able to get without going and buying a first year single cut. Not really in the position to do that right now. You know, if you've got lots of money kicking around, you want to help a brother out, I'd more than happily receive that. But even still, I think this is a very fair comparison. We're going to put them side by side through a series of tone tests, and then we'll talk about the experience of playing these guitars and what feels different between the two. They both have a brand new set of D'Addario 10s on. Now, as far as the Custom 24 goes, this guitar over here, absolute beaut that it is, we don't have a Custom 24 to test this against. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare it against my own personal #1 PRS, which is a Custom 22 from 2002, so quite a long time ago. It has been modified in some key ways. Specifically, I've put some large stainless steel frets in, as is my preference, and I have my own preferred set of humbuckers for this guitar, which is a Bulldog Black Label and Extremist set, hand-wound in the UK. But because of the physical differences between the position of the neck pickup on these guitars, when we do that comparison, we'll limit it to just the bridge pickup. So what you can think about these comparisons as is essentially a direct apples to apples comparison with a new guitar and an older guitar when it comes to the McCartys. And when we come to the customs, you can think about it as a comparison between a modified, customized, dialed in version of an old PRS versus a brand new one off the peg. Let's begin by taking a listen to an audio comparison between the two McCarty guitars, then we'll talk some more. The first thing that jumps out at me when comparing these two guitars is the sound of the pickups, and specifically the additional top end and clarity that we get from the new McCarty 3s. They don't have the same mid-range punch that we get from the 8515 LTs in the 594, and there are some styles that I just really crave that sound for. However, the neck pickup in particular is a lot less boomy, it's a lot more clear and balances much better with the bridge pickup, and these pickups remain articulate no matter how much gain you throw at them, but they have a really beautiful sweet quality when you play them clean and when you play them with more of a bluesy touch. Now, in terms of playability, the two guitars feel very similar, but there are some noticeable upgrades. Particularly the tuners feel a lot smoother and a lot more stable. There's a lot less lash going on here. They feel like they're a lot more responsive to my touch. It could just be because they're newer, but these are a redesigned style of tuner and they definitely feel better. And also, I love the way these new buttons look. Now, the nitro finish on the neck is going to divide some opinions. It is a little sticky, and that is something that we expect from a nitro finish guitar. You may like that. You might like that old guitar feel. Myself, I prefer a satin or just a straight gloss on the back of the neck, but I do prefer the way the nitro looks on the guitar's body, and I think I prefer it over the finish on my 594. Now, the bridges, that's basically a wash. They're essentially the same. I know they're redesigned and the saddles are slightly different, but I already love the way the 594 bridge works, and this is no exception. Now, one noticeable difference between the two is that this guitar has no coil splits, and that is not a deal breaker for me, but it is definitely a win for the older guitars. I haven't looked inside to see if these pickups are 4-conductor. It's possible that you could wire coil splits in if you so desired, but for a guitar at this price point, I don't think I'd be taking a soldering iron to it in a hurry. But I gotta say, when I was playing this guitar, when I was kind of feeling it out before we started rolling the cameras, I didn't find myself wanting for the coil splits, although they are so good in the 594. I'm kind of sad that they're not there. But what I will say is that the organic and clear quality of these pickups more than makes up for the fact that we don't have access to those more sparkly coil split tones. It also cleans up just as well as the 594 does, and again, it's kind of a wash here in terms of playability, I think, but I think for as far as tone goes, this is a more balanced and more refined take on the 594 recipe. Now, let's compare the Custom 24 to my Custom 22. And once again, I'm going to remind you that we'll be sticking just on the bridge pickup for these examples. And this is because the position of the neck pickup will have such an impact on the way it sounds that it's not really a fair comparison. But to be honest, this is not really a fair comparison anyway, because as we mentioned, my Custom 22 is very heavily modified. So you might think about this more as a question question of, well, should I buy an old guitar and mod it, or should I just buy a new one off the peg? Let's take a listen to how these guitars sound when played back to back, and then we'll talk some more. Now for me, this is a much more difficult one to tease apart because in the McCarty comparison, it was pretty clear that the new guitar is superior to the older guitar in many ways. The finish is nicer, the tuners are nicer, the pickups sound more open, more balanced. It's just a more refined take on the McCarty 594 platform. However, with the Customs comparison, it's kind of a preference thing, and because the red guitar is so finely tuned to my preferences, I've done so many modifications to it to get it just how I want it, it's very difficult to separate myself from that. However, what I will say is this guitar performs really, really impressively, and if it was between this guitar and an unmodified version of a Custom 22 from this particular era, I'd probably be reaching for this guitar. However, what you could always do is you could always grab an older guitar. They do retain their price, so don't expect to get any crazy deals. You used to be able to get mad deals on these PRS guitars, and that's how I ended up with so many of them. But you could grab yourself an older guitar and mod it to your preferences. However, I gotta say, if it was me and I had the money, I'd probably just be reaching for a brand new Custom 24 because this guitar really does deliver. It is articulate, it's open, it's responsive to your picking, it plays like an absolute dream and has all of these modern accoutrements. It has the new tuners, the new tremolo system, the brand new pickups. It's got the 5-way blade switch, which is my preference over a 3-way toggle. I love a blade switch. Man, this guitar really does deliver as a modern PRS Custom 24. And as somebody who's never been a huge fan of the Custom 24 platform, much more of a 22 fret guy myself, I gotta say I have bonded with this guitar quite rapidly. If you do want to check out the sounds of these guitars, we have got a review on the limited edition satin version of this guitar, which you can go and check out, and we're also going to do one on this McCarty SC56 if you'd like to see a more full forensic rundown of these guitars. But to answer the core question at the central conceit of this video, which is, are the new guitars better than the old guitars, or are the old guitars so much better, as is so often the case with so many brands? For me, I feel like the new guitars edge it. And this is something that I love about PRS, is this constant pursuit of improvement. There's no resting on their laurels. They're always trying to improve the formula. And this is why Paul, when you chat to him in interviews, he's very keen not to talk about the past. He's always looking forward, and it shows in these new guitars. Folks, this has been a look at 2 new guitars from PRS's 40th anniversary series with a view to answering the question, are they better than the old guitars? By how much? Who can say? But I think the answer is yes. My name's Jennison from Thinking About Guitar. I'll see you again very soon.